All right, boys, this is it. This is the point of no return. Okay, obviously I'm not gonna cut the roof off of a perfectly good C6 Z06. Nobody would do that, or at least that's what I thought until I went online and found that there's a company who will charge you $25,000 to convert your C6 Z06 into a convertible. Who would spend money on a perfectly good sports car in order to make it worse and reduce its value? And then I said, wait a second, Josh, that's exactly what you're doing with your build. And today we've kind of reached the point of no return because I'm going to be spending money to make the car worse, but I think it's okay because I do have a plan to turn Goldie into a convertible. It's just not what you think. The main issue I have with this car right now is the seats. They're comfortable enough and they're decent for street driving, but when you're on the racetrack, you really want to be held in place. You don't want to be sliding around. And these seats come up super short in that department. I have to brace my knees against the console and against the door card. And I'm just constantly moving and trying to like control my body. You want your seat to do that for you. So that eats up a lot of your mental bandwidth, but what it also does is it means that you can't really calibrate your brain very well to what the car is doing. When you're moving around inside the car, you can't really tell as clearly when the tires are starting to slide or whatever, and so you're just losing a lot of confidence. Not to mention, these seats just don't make you feel safe in the car. Well, the solution to my problem is to install a set of racing bucket seats, and I happen to own this pair of Sparco QRT-Rs. I'm pretty certain they're going to fit in my C6 Z06 because when I owned a C5 Z06, they fit in that. Now, a word of warning, I'm a little on the slim side. I'm 6'1", 185 pounds. These are a little snug for me. You have to go pretty narrow on seats for these Corvettes because the cockpit doesn't allow a lot of room. So some people run into trouble when they get a narrow seat and then they can't fit in it. Running a racing bucket seat in a street car is not a perfect solution. It brings its own set of issues. So I'm going to pull out the factory driver's seat and show you what I mean. Well, side by side, it's easy to see why the racing bucket is superior to the factory seat for driving on track. The number one thing is we've got a lot more side support to hold you in place under cornering. We've got support at your shoulders, your sides, and your thighs. Really deep thigh support. We've also got pass-throughs for your harnesses, so you can use a 6-point harness and lock yourself in place. But the big downside is getting in and out. With the factory seat, since you don't have a lot of thigh support, you can just slide your way out. But with the racing bucket, getting in and out means you have to get over these supports, which are probably like 6 inches deep. And so you have to push with your arms to raise yourself out of the seat. And that's not something that most people want to do on a regular basis. There's one other big downside to racing buckets, and I'm going to show that to you when I put it in the car. Yeah, that was easy. Hi, Josie. What are you doing? What do you think? By the way, never let your dog sit in one of these seats. You'll be getting the dog hair out forever. So I'm in, I'm comfortable, I've got tons of headroom, I like the seating position, but there's a small problem, and that's that the seat isn't actually bolted in, and when you buy a bucket seat like this, you also need an aftermarket mount. So I bought this. It's the Ultra Low seat mount from AMT Motorsport, and it's designed to work with the C5 all the way up to the C8 Corvette. I've got to say this mount is a nice piece of kit from AMT. And by the way, Mark from AMT seems like a really smart guy who knows his stuff. They made a video about setting up and installing these brackets, and following the steps made it a breeze to get them mounted to my seat. I used the exact same mounting holes that Mark did, and the fit was close to perfect, but the mounts do offer a lot of adjustability. Once I had the seat mounted to the brackets, I put it in the car to check the fit and see what the driving position would be like. I was kind of shocked that it was close to perfect right out of the gate. The next step was to actually mount the brackets to the car. From the factory, the car has studs sticking up from the floor, and notice how those studs are recessed below the carpet. When you look at the factory seat, the frame has some pretty tall legs that extend down to reach the studs. The aftermarket brackets are flat, so the kit includes stud extenders. I did another test fit and found that the bracket was sitting on the carpet and the studs were way too low. AMT's install video says to use a maximum of 2 washers as spacers underneath the extenders, and then you can use more washers on top of the studs to raise the bracket even higher. But in order to get the bracket above the carpet, I needed a big stack of washers on top of the studs, which didn't leave enough threads to securely mount the bracket. The install video shows the bracket going into a race car on bare metal, so I'm wondering if the kit was tested on a car with a full interior, because the carpet and insulation are really thick. The situation is even worse on the other side because there are bundles of wiring for the seat that run underneath the carpet. I cut a slit in the carpet so I could run the wiring over the carpet to get more room. It's definitely possible that I'm doing something wrong, but I really wasn't expecting to run into issues with this kit because it was expensive, and I definitely don't want to have to start cutting the carpets out of the car. Like every project with this car, I've run into an issue, but I'm pretty confident that AMT will help me get it sorted out. For now, I did a very janky, very temporary short-term solution just to see how the seat fits. It's absolutely not safe to be driven in this form whatsoever. Oh man. This seat is a huge improvement. I cannot overstate it enough. You feel so much more through the seat of your pants, and it's holding you in place, so when you're going around corners, you don't have to brace yourself. And the reason I did this now, I've got some other suspension stuff planned, is I want to be able to feel the changes from the suspension stuff. This was huge. I actually wish I had done this sooner because it makes such a big difference. Also, it's very comfortable. I like the driving position a lot. I'm sitting a little bit lower, and so I actually have better visibility than I do with the stock seat. But there is an issue. There's a bit of a dilemma that I'm facing, and that's with the seat belt. This is the factory belt, but it's for display purposes only. It is not hooked up to anything right now, which admittedly is very unsafe, but I never drive on the street without a seatbelt. This one time probably isn't gonna kill me. I feel like I've got a few different options when it comes to the seatbelts. The first one is I could run the 6-point harness all the time on the street. Racing harness, racing seat, should be safe, right? Well, not so fast. With the 6-point harness, if you're not wearing a helmet that has a head and neck restraint, it's actually a lot more dangerous than the factory 3-point belt would be, because the harness holds your body in place, but your neck is free to move around, so you can get really bad whiplash even in a relatively small accident. So that's kind of a no-go from a safety perspective. Another option would be to install this 3-point belt, the factory belt, on the racing seat. I'm not really sure how you would do that safely and in a way where the harness isn't going to interfere with the factory belts. I also don't know for sure that the airbag would still work properly in an accident, so I'm not 100% convinced that that's a great idea. On top of that, I want other people potentially to be able to drive this car, or people who don't fit in this tight racing bucket, to ride in the car as a passenger. So what I think I've settled on is option number 3, which I'm calling convertible mode. And that's where Goldie has a street mode and a track mode. In track mode, we've got the racing seat, we've got the 6-point harnesses, we've got the racing brakes, we've got the sticky tires and the big wheels. But then in street mode, we go back to the factory seats, we put in street pads, we put the factory wheels and tires back on, and then there are no compromises. Of course, there is a compromise. The compromise is all the work that it takes to switch it back and forth, and I do a lot of track days. So I'm still pretty certain that that's the right way to go, but I would like your input. Let me know if you think I should run Goldie as a convertible street car, track car, or if there's some other option that you think would be better. We still got a little ways to go on this seat, obviously. I've got harnesses on order. I'm gonna contact AMT about how to get this thing mounted properly. We're gonna figure out the seatbelt situation. I wanna thank you guys for coming along for the ride. Do me a favor, watch another video. I've got a link right here. We'll see you next time.